Are you struggling with YouTube? Are you thinking about quitting the platform? Today I want to share my top 7 tips that keep me consistent and resilient on YouTube so that you might also be able to keep calm and keep posting. So grab a cup of tea and let's dive into it. Almost anyone who has ever published on YouTube knows how challenging this can be. Showing up on YouTube isn't easy. It is something that small creators in particular find really difficult to begin with. As a small creator myself, having only started this channel earlier this year, I completely relate to this feeling. And the challenges of YouTube aren't reserved for just smaller creators. We've seen this quitting YouTube trend sweeping the biggest creators in particular in the last year. So for smaller creators that are looking to find inspiration to stay on the platform, this can be more challenging. So what I wanted to do today is share the tips that I have personally found have created a mindset shift for me to be able to overcome the lows that can come with YouTube and stay consistent on the platform. So let's dive into my first tip. Tip number 1 to stay consistent and resilient on YouTube is to remember that everything is a remix. Do you find yourself trying to force new ideas? Remember that the best ideas already exist for you to be able to draw upon. Creators love to think of this mantra of create, don't copy. I know because I was adamantly one of those people. It's what I used to tell my personal brand coaching clients all the time. Until I realized that it was somewhat of an ignorant perspective because it almost gives you too much credit. I'm all for credit where credit is due, but as Mark Twain said, there is no such thing as a new idea. It is impossible. We simply take a lot of old ideas and put them into a sort of mental kaleidoscope. As I say, we are standing on the shoulders of giants. Our ideas build on the knowledge and the experience of the people that have gone before us. In one of my favourite books by Austin Keelong called Still Like an Artist, he highlights the work of Kobe Bryant in developing his career. He talks about how he used to spend a lot of time studying the tapes of his on-court heroes. He wanted to be able to perfectly emulate them, but he couldn't because he didn't have their exact body. So by default, he put his own spin onto his moves, and we saw where that took his career. But remixing ideas is, of course, not about imitation or plagiarism. It's about inspiration, about finding what has resonated or worked for other people. Maybe it is within your niche, or maybe it is something completely unrelated, but you can put your own unique perspective on it to make it relevant to your potential audience. Tip number 2 to stay consistent and resilient on YouTube is to remember that everything is an experiment. One of my favourite pieces of YouTube advice comes from Ali Abdaal and his 1% rule. This is simply to focus on being 1% better in every video. For me, this is the simple, sustainable strategy for success on YouTube. It takes the pressure off while still ensuring that you are constantly improving on the platform. Your 1%ers don't relate to things like your views or your subscriber counts, but relate to the things that you can control. So what are the little 1%ers that you can add to your video that is going to make it 1% better than your previous video? And this can be as tiny as experimenting with maybe different props in your video and making it 1% different to what you published previously. And over time, these tiny changes can have a huge impact. In The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett, he talks about outfailing the competition. And this isn't about just embracing failure when it comes. It is about actively seeking it out and having a relentless focus on experimenting. He says, failure and invention are inseparable twins. To invent, you have to experiment. And if you know in advance that it's going to work, It's not an experiment. Tip number 3 to stay consistent and resilient on YouTube is to remember that there is always more to the story. Did you know that Bill Gates went to one of the only schools with a state-of-the-art computer? It is a small detail in his success story that can often be overlooked. Don't compare yourself to other people's success or your beginning to their middle. Even YouTube's biggest creator, Mr. Beast, talks about how he posted hundreds of videos before any started to gain traction. There are some YouTube creators who talk about how fast they grew on the platform. But what they don't share as much of is that they spent maybe years on the platform before they were able to gain that traction, or that it might have just been one video that contributed to the success that they were able to see. Or perhaps they had a significant profile on another social media platform and that contributed to the rapid traction that they were able to gain on YouTube. Either way, remind yourself that everyone begins somewhere, and even those people that you might compare yourself to who are seemingly really successful on YouTube started somewhere. And instead of comparing yourself to those people, be inspired by it, because if they can do it, then so can you. Tip number 4 to stay consistent and resilient on YouTube is to play the infinite game. In Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, he highlights that there are 2 kinds of games. First, there is the finite game. This is the game with known players and a fixed set of rules. There is certain objectives that the players are trying to achieve, and once they achieve these objectives, then the game is over. The infinite game, however, there are known players and unknown players, and there's no fixed rules, so the way that the players play the game can change at any time. There's also no finish line, which means that there's no way of winning in the infinite game, which means that the primary objective of the game is to continue to perpetuate the game. So if you are trying to win on YouTube, then try and rethink your mindset to be about playing the game for the sake of playing the game, to continue to perpetuate the game of YouTube, to play the infinite game instead of trying to win on the platform. And let's talk about why that matters next. Tip number 5 is to show up on YouTube for yourself. There is this general idea in social media that around 90% of people on most platforms are lurkers. So if you are creating on social media, then you automatically join the minority of people on the platform. You are willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do. No matter what results you're seeing in the analytics of your YouTube videos, with every YouTube video, you're developing your problem-solving skills, your lateral thinking, your technical skills, your communication skills, your storytelling skills. If you are presenting on YouTube, for example, if you are doing talking head videos or you're talking in any way or in whatever presentation you're doing, you are also facing a fear that most people aren't willing to do. For example, it's often said that 75% of people fear public speaking more than death. So by showing up on YouTube, it is likely that you are also putting yourself in the minority of people that are willing to do the things that the majority aren't willing to do. With each video, you are facing a fear head-on that a lot of people won't. Tip number 6 to stay consistent and resilient on YouTube is to remember that what gets scheduled gets done. You might have all of the motivation in the world to be consistent on YouTube, but in reality, it's what gets scheduled that will actually get executed. So schedule YouTube into your routine. Schedule when the different stages will occur as well. For example, when are you planning your YouTube videos? When are you scripting them? When are you filming and editing them? When are you working on packaging and publishing your YouTube videos? What I find really useful is being really strategic about where these time blocks fit in my schedule as well. For example, ask yourself when you are the most creative. This might be when you come back from your morning or your lunchtime walk. That might be the best time for you to start planning and scripting your videos. Or when are you the most alert in your routine? This could be the best time for you to film your videos. When do you find that you need a little bit of a mental break? That might be the best time to get into the flow state of editing. Whatever it is, honor the commitments that you have made to YouTube in your schedule, the same way you would if you were meeting with another person, and try and not feel guilty about it. Remember that urgent tasks that can often come up in other areas have a way of disguising themselves as being urgent and important, when often they are maybe more just urgent but not as important, particularly to your long game. So when you are thinking about how you prioritize your day and when you work on YouTube, think about what is more important to your infinite game. Take an athlete, for example. If they were to miss one training, can we say that this would completely impact their success in the long term? It's not likely. But if they were to miss a lot of trainings and make this a habit, then they would be, in the long term, a very different player. So think about you showing up on YouTube or showing up to the different stages of YouTube as you showing up for training. And remind yourself that every time you do, you are making yourself a better player in the game of YouTube. And you're setting up your YouTube channel for success via your schedule. Tip number 7 is to adopt a neutral mindset. Whether a video is a success or a flop, or if I have a positive comment or a negative one, I try to stay in a neutral frame of mind. The science says that we have a natural negativity bias. This is evolutionarily hardwired into our survival instinct. Historically, this used to keep us alive, but now our negativity bias is built into some of the most simple everyday activities. So remind yourself that negativity can stick like Velcro and positivity can fall away like Teflon. I prefer to try and see it as all Teflon. Being neutral to the wins and the losses, the praise and the criticism, and continuing to show up for your art despite what the critics' acclaim might be or the critics' ridicule. You play the game for the love of playing the game. As Andy Warhol said, don't think about making art, just get it done. Let everyone else decide if it's good or bad, whether they love it or hate it. While they are deciding, make even more art. So stay calm and keep posting. If you are just getting started on YouTube, then make sure you check out my previous episode on 50 tiny tips for YouTube beginners. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.